Welcome to It's Only Up From Here, a space to revel in the alchemy of transformation, a space to be a nudging light at the end of the tunnel, a space to remind you you've been your own hero all along. This is Lauren, your host of It's Only Up From Here. Sometimes I wondered how I could get on this podcast and talk about certain topics, especially while I'm still living through many situations that I'm talking about. You know, how can I tell you it's only up from here if I'm still living through the unknown? How is my story any more transformative than someone else if I truly still don't know how things will turn out? But I think part of this journey is still leaning into the unknown. And I think a part of leaning into the unknown is knowing you'll find the answers, knowing that this is not the end, and maybe this can be a space that we move through together. I feel like every time I lean into the unknown of something in my life, better always arises from it. When it was 2020, my world was incredibly still at the time, as I'm sure many people's were, outside of medical workers and people who worked in hospitals and emergency workers. A lot of us, our world was still, and there was a lot of unknown. It was very scary. You didn't know what the next 2 to 3 years were going to look like. When COVID hit in March, February 2020, I remember thinking that I might be living at home for the rest of my life. I was thinking this is the end times. We're going to be sick. People are going to be dying. And I don't know when this is going to get better. And in fact, I didn't know if COVID would take me out. It felt like every single day at the time was just melding together. Truly, it really did. It felt like Monday and Thursday and Tuesday and Friday. It didn't matter what day it was because it was just this never-ending time of quietness and stillness sitting at home. I remember all I did was go on walks. I went on hikes. I was always out in nature. I was doing yoga and Pilates every day just to stay sane. I was living at home with my mother at the time. And, I knew that we were going to be in the unknown for a really long time. I was working remote at this family-owned publishing company out of Chapel Hill. But any dreams that I had about moving abroad or moving to a new city, it felt like it just came to a screeching halt when COVID hit. It felt like that reality was never going to be one again. And not to be dramatic, I think it was one of those things where I already seemingly didn't have much going for me after college. So that when 2020 came around and the world shut down, I didn't see an end to my situation. That was until I decided to make the move to New York City. I actually wrote about this in an anthology. It's called Luck and Opportunities, Personal Stories Between If and If Only. It's a personal story publishing project by Daniel Boone Publishing Footsteps based out of North Carolina. I wrote a piece in this anthology called Despite All the Scary where I talk about my move to New York. And I even mentioned this in the piece that when it hit midnight on January 1st, 2020, I remember thinking this year will be different. This year is going to be different. Something different is going to happen. And I know that's so cliche, like new year, new me, but I truly believe that 2020, the night of January 1st, that it was going to be something profound that happened to my life this year because 2019 was such a rough year. I was struggling so badly that I just knew that in 2020, this is going to be a year where something changes drastically. So lo and behold, when March came around and my 25th birthday plans were canceled due to COVID striking, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, okay, I was just being delusional. And it felt like that for a long time that nothing was going to change. It wasn't until June of 2020 that the world was slowly opening up in North Carolina. And I'm going to be honest, it seemed like the South never quite observed the pandemic. But there was a brief moment in North Carolina where things really were shut down and the world really was quiet and the streets really were empty. But June rolled around and slowly but surely bars started opening up, at least to sitting outside. And there was one night I was sitting out at this brewery with an ex turned lover, turned friend, I don't know. I was sitting out with him when I was telling him, pretty much pouring my heart out about how things weren't going to change for me, how sad I was, and how I felt so stuck. I remember telling him how I had this dream one night where I was in this unknown place. And I don't even know where the place was, but it was somewhere different. It was somewhere far away, and it was somewhere where I wasn't in the state that I'm currently in. Not even the physical state, but an emotional state. I was somewhere far away, just walking through this garden. And I remember feeling so happy in this dream. And I remember mulling over my thoughts to him and just saying that I'm genuinely not happy. And I said, I wish I could just do something different. I wish I could just go away like in this dream. And he looked at me and said, just as matter of fact, what's stopping you from living the life that you want? It's only you in the way. And at the time I'm just like, oh, he's being overzealous about my potential. That's just him. That's just his personality. He's always an optimist. I remember even being irritated when he said that. Because I'm like, he thinks it's so easy to just get up and move to where you want to go. Why is he acting like this is so easy? And to me, all I could think was, how the hell am I just going to get up and move to where I want to be? That's unrealistic for the average person. And at the time, we were loosely talking about New York City that night. I think I maybe brought it up in conversation, like how that would be nice to move there. And he was like, yeah, you work remote. You've been working remote all of 2020. You live at home. What's stopping you? You haven't been paying rent. And I just know at the time I deeply thought that was an unrealistic thing for him to say. But then there was just this turning point, this inflection point of sorts, where it dawned on me that what is stopping me? Maybe I actually can. And when he said, what's stopping you? One day I just kept thinking about his words and I was like, well, what is stopping me? Is it fear? Is it the unknown? Is it the thoughts of others? Like, what would others think? Especially in 2020, like that was one thing I remember being so worried about at the time. What would others think if I just up and moved to New York City? But there was this turning point where I said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So that's when I made the decision. I made the decision that summer of 2020 that I would take the money I had saved from working throughout quarantine and move to New York City by October. Don't know what came about October, but in my head, I was like, October, that's the date. That's the launch date. Fall of 2020, I'm going to be gone. I didn't always grow up thinking about living in New York City. It wasn't necessarily a dream destination for me. But at some point when I really became all into my writing and my art, I had fancied the idea of moving to New York, especially in 2019, the year after I had graduated college. I had fancied about moving there, starting a career there, starting a new chapter of my life there, and to move past my comfort zone. There was some sort of turning point where I knew that I wanted something so badly that I wasn't going to give up. So from that turning point, I spent the next few weeks searching online for apartments and roommates in New York. And I pretty much started on this app called Roomie, where you can either look for apartments or you can look for roommates, or like people who have apartment listings and they're looking for one other roommate. It was very easy. I remember I uploaded my license to verify myself through a background check. I think I paid like $20 at most, but that was important to me because I was like, I want my potential roommates to be verified and vetted. And once I was accepted, I just started sifting through rooms and roommates and reading bios and sketching out mine to be as honest as possible. And there was one day that I bookmarked this apartment listing, a room listing for some roommates that I saw. It looked pretty great, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. I bookmarked it and I planned on reaching out to them, but within a day they had actually reached out to me. I had started talking with them and I was talking with one other girl from another apartment, and those were the 2 room listings that were top contenders for me. I ended up buying a plane ticket in August to go up there and view the apartments. And I remember at the time the plane ticket was dirt cheap because nobody was going to New York City. So the end of August came and I'm heading up to New York, and I actually stayed with my cousin who was living in Bushwick at the time. Shout out to my cousin Devin. And I was looking at apartments in Harlem, so it was a pretty long commute, and I definitely got lost trying to get up to Harlem. But August came, I'm there, I go to view the 2 apartments. And the first apartment that I viewed, the room was actually really big. I remember that room was like $50 cheaper a month than the other option I was going to view. But I remember thinking that the whole apartment felt so cold and empty. And I remember the 2 girls that lived there seemed a little apprehensive about me moving. I remember one of the girls was like, you're going to have to pay rent and do a background check and do a credit check. And at the time I'm thinking, no shit. So I ended up being a little unsure about that apartment, and I went to go view a second apartment and bedroom, and immediately it just felt warm and inviting when I walked in. And a girl who would end up being one of my future roommates greeted me, and she showed me around. She showed me the room. The room was actually pretty small. It was very small, kind of like a box. But I don't know, something about the apartment just felt like I could live there. Like the vibes were just right, to say the least. So I viewed that apartment, and I realized that if I was going to say yes to any room and apartment and roommates, that it was going to be them. After viewing the apartments in Harlem, I made the long trek back to Brooklyn. And I remember getting back to my cousin's apartment and just looking out at the view of Manhattan and thinking, should I take this room? Should I actually take this room and move to New York City? And I actually called my mom that day and just said, I saw this apartment, I saw the room, it seems great. I want to do it, but I don't know. I think I should wait. I don't know if I should go. And I remember I just felt scared. I remember feeling so fearful. And my mom on the other end of the line said, what's the alternative if you say no to this? She knew as I did that every opportunity has 2 sides. So despite every fear that I had, every apprehension, every concern, on September 25th, 2020, I ended up moving to New York City. And that was nearly 4 years ago. I truly get chills when I think about it. I think about that time between August and September as I was packing up every suitcase I could find in the house to move up there. I felt terrified. I was so scared. I was seeing a virtual therapist at the time in North Carolina, and honestly, shout out to her too, because she really pushed me to move up to New York. And I remember telling her every fear that I had and her genuinely working with me through them and not judging me for wanting to make this move and just really being there for me through every concern. And in my final session with her as we signed off, I remember her looking at me and saying, have fun in the Big Apple. That time truly feels like a blur and so surreal, if I'm being honest. I remember being so crippled with anxiety during that period and just thinking, what if this is a disaster? What if these roommates are a disaster? What if the room is a disaster? What if the city chews me up and spits me out? I have been through so many lows, severe lows with my mental health in my life that there were times I never thought about my future. So often I never thought about, what's after college? Where will I move? Where will I go? What will 30 be like? What will 25 be like? What will 29 be like? At 20, I truly didn't think about getting this far, if I'm being honest. And the grief and the weight and the trauma that I had been carrying so many years, I never thought I was capable of a move like that. But the way that life shifted and the way that time shifted and how everything happened that led me to be able to move to New York, just the timing of it, the fact that I was remote at the time, the fact that the room I was moving into, I was subleasing from a girl and she left her furniture, everything seemingly was falling into place for me to get up and leave. And I don't know if it was luck. I don't know if it was blessed. I truly don't know, but I was much more capable than I ever realized. I never thought I would get this far. And even living in New York, that wasn't the end. Moving to New York wasn't the end. This wasn't a fairy tale ending wrapped in a bow. I was only 25 when I moved. And so even looking back on my time here, I've had so many low mental health moments. Hell, I've had some of the worst days of my life living here. Life has happened in the past nearly 4 years that sometimes I feel like I forget how big of a feat it was moving here at 25 and overcoming that hurdle and overcoming the fear of the unknown. that now at 29, I sometimes forget how much more life I have ahead of me, how many more seasons I have ahead of me, and how many more chapters I have, and how many more times I have to make myself proud. There really is a possibility where you can overcome a lot of what you've been afraid of. And there's so much life ahead of you. There's so much life ahead of you at 20 and 23 and 25, and even at 29 and 30 and 32 and 35. There's so much more life ahead of you. And sometimes it feels like something can be so scary or life can be so hard that we can't see the other end. And I remember thinking back to that conversation I was having at the brewery and thinking, just being so frustrated. Like, why does he think that I can do something like that? But the fact of the matter was, I could do that. I can do anything. And I would encourage so many people, especially so many women and young women, to think about their future. Like, really think about your future and really think about, where would you see yourself in 10 years? Where will you want to go in 10 years? I think about my times in middle school and high school and college and the short period after college. I didn't really think about my life 10 years from then. I didn't think about where I wanted to go. I was so right here in the right now. And obviously it is important to live in the present, but it's also important to envision how your life will become and envision your life laid out into the future. Because then you don't get so caught up on any difficult and challenging thing that happens in the present. There were so many times where it felt like my life was ending, and if only I had known as a young woman in my teens and in my early 20s that at 25 I would move from my small hometown of Greensboro, North Carolina to New York City, I would have went through so many more situations differently. If only I had known, or if I'd even looked into the future, I would have known that life would have began again for me. My life has ended and began so many times, whether the next morning or the next week or months down the line. If only I had known. But I did the best with what I could do at the time. I did the best with what I knew at the time. And it is my honest hope that if you're listening to this and you resonate, you do the best with what you got at the time, but also know that there are so many seasons ahead of you and there are so many dreams that will come to you, and there's so much more that can happen in life that you will never even expect or realize. I think about how that dream came to me for a reason, and I don't know if that dream was the turning point, if the talk with my friend was the turning point, or maybe just something that sparked inside of me weeks later was the turning point. But I know that it meant everything to me, and that turning point came to save me. And maybe I came to save me. There's this quote that I often see online that says the only person coming to save you is yourself. If only I had known years ago, years back, that I would be my hero, that I would save me, and that it wouldn't be some knight in shining armor to come sweep me off my feet and take me to another city and take me to another place and offer me this life that I want. It would be me. I would be the one to do that. And it was my hope that so many young women look ahead in their life and know that it is you that's going to save you, that you are capable of saving yourself, that you can take yourself out of this situation, and there can always be an inflection point where you move to the next step, where you move higher. It's true. It really can happen. And it really is good to keep hoping. It really is good to keep dreaming. I wasn't dreaming like that at 20, and maybe that dream at 25 was what I needed to save myself. If only I had known then how much life is ahead of me. I actually wrote a poem my second year in New York City titled "It Was a Dream." It was written after the poet Lucille Clifton, who wrote a poem titled "It Was a Dream." And in this poem, she talks about how her greater self rises up. And I wrote a poem inspired after that message from Lucille Clifton. It was a dream after Lucille Clifton. It was a dream in which it was an autumn day. A soft, tender chill had permeated the changing air, and a quiet afternoon sun shimmered across an enticing landscape, lighting up trees that had transfigured into a russet, amber, and crimson medley of splendor as they prepared to release. That June heat had been far too blistering, the summer rain an unruly downpour. But it was autumn, and I, along with the foliage, was transforming into something strange and delightful, full of color and grandeur. And what was meant to die was finally dying. It was a dream in which it wasn't spring, but I bloomed in the act of letting go. And much like the brilliant, enduring trees before me, it was a dream in which I was the long-lasting heroine of my life. If you like what you heard, there's more of where that came from. If you're interested in reading about my story and luck and opportunity, visit randalljones.com/6minutestories. You can find my August 29th, 2021 episode titled Despite All the Scary by Lauren Summers. This is Lauren, your host of It's Only Up From Here.